DirtTrax is sponsored by Can-Am. The ride says it all. Polaris, the ultimate in off-road vehicles. Hatfield McCoy Trails, where hundreds of miles of off-road adventure await you today. And by Yamaha ATVs and side-by-side vehicles. Real world tough.
Knowing what technology will come out tomorrow is nearly impossible to figure out, but there are events throughout the world that help us to better understand what future technology will be shaping tomorrow. Thanks to our friends at Polaris Defense, we were able to catch a glimpse of what's to come, not just in the ATV world, but more specifically in the world of robotic autonomy. I was in Miami at the DARPA Robotics Challenge, or DRC, where specially funded teams came together to compete in a robotics challenge. You probably have heard of DARPA, but in the unlikely event that you have not, they are responsible for much of the technology we interact with today, being scaled down and brought into the consumer world. They're also the creators of what we now call the Internet, and are a branch of the US government that funds special research projects to help propel new technology, many times for military purposes, but also for other specific uses. Rich, from Polaris Defense, will tell us about Polaris and DARPA's relationship.
Polaris got involved with DARPA for two different reasons. Number one was their interest in hybrid technology in vehicles of our size, and we've done some work with DARPA over the last few years in that area. And specifically for this event was in unmanned ground vehicles. Polaris is the leader in ultralight mobility, and therefore the leader in ultralight mobility with unmanned platforms.
Polaris has a very new but successful history with the US military, and are now the leading suppliers of vehicles like the Ranger and the Sportsman.
Polaris's history with the US military began in 2005, officially when Polaris Defense was formed. Prior to that, we'd been providing commercial off-the-shelf technology to special forces operating in Afghanistan. And about 2005-2006 timeframe, they came to us to ask us to militarize some of our commercial off-the-shelf technology.
While their success with the US military is very impressive on its own, Polaris has branched out much larger than what you might have expected.
Polaris Defense has grown significantly since our inception in 2005, and really started on our recent growth trajectory around 2009. And since that time, we've got vehicles active in 17 countries with 17 different militaries. A lot of them are special forces, but some are straight militaries. We're in all the US military services, and certainly our allies, Australia, Britain, Canada, all have our vehicles both in the special forces and in the regular forces.
My natural question to Rich, me being a gearhead and an enthusiast, is does this military technology make an impact for the consumer, and how is the trickle-down effect felt?
Part of our charge as Polaris Defense is to commercialize technologies that are not in the consumer market today that we think may be in the future. And by using our expertise with the military and making, if you will, a more robust and perhaps expensive solution that the military is allowed to test and shake and break, we find out what the specific things are that the consumer market would like, and we're able to refine it. The terrain armor tires that you see here, the non-pneumatic tires, were developed with the military in mind. As you can imagine, mission critical type situations, flat tires are bad in many ways. And so this product is a never flat. We've shot it with a 50 caliber, we've put a railroad spike through it, and we've run thousands of miles under those conditions. So it's not a run flat where you can get home, limping home at 10 miles an hour for over 30 miles. You can use the vehicle until the mission is over.
Knowing that the technology truly does make its way down the line to the consumer, I was interested to ask Rich what he thought about the interaction between an autonomous robot and a Polaris Ranger, because that's precisely what we were here to see.
Well, a robot interacting with a Polaris vehicle allows two things to happen. It allows Polaris, in our desire to be the unmanned platform of choice, to look at how something like a robot would interact with our vehicle, which make absolute sense for human beings who we know how they move. What we don't know is how humanoid robots move, and we learned that here in the DARPA Challenge. The second part is we get exposure of the incredible utility of our vehicles. So this DARPA Challenge is around disaster relief, and it is perhaps, aside from the military, the most perfect fit for our off-road mobility and our technology like non-pneumatic tires.
While at the DRC trials, I was expecting to see a barrage of lifelike robots that we're used to seeing in feature films. But the truth is, while many of them are extremely cool looking and very functional, they're a long ways from taking over the world. From climbing industrial scaffolding to walking through rubble piles and turning valves, the tasks the robots had to complete were not simple. Well, for the average human they may be, but keep in mind, some of these robots were working entirely off their own electronic brains, making judgment calls and acting on what their programmers had taught them to do. While much of the trials were slow and at times painful, keep in mind these robots are receiving as much as 20 million points of reference per second through laser and radio vision, and the bottleneck of being able to process this information can be crippling. But eventually, they continue on their journey. One of the robots that shone throughout the entire competition was Shaft, a metallic blue design that was able to surprise everyone, competing in all of the events and being able to complete just about all of them with time to spare. Shaft moved very skillfully through many tasks, and at one in particular that was surprising to me was a process of picking up a rotary cutting tool, pressing the power button, cutting out a specific area of drywall, and then knocking out the cut drywall section. Shaft did this with time to spare. Now that's pretty impressive.
DirtTrax is sponsored by Brimstone, where the journey is your reward.
While all the tasks were equally diverse, the most interesting and the least attempted by all of the teams was the driving task, where the robot would actually have to drive a Polaris Ranger. One of the first to attempt the Ranger was Hubo, a two-legged, two-arm robot that stood roughly 4 feet tall. This small design easily fit within the XP's ROPS roll cage and was able to both steer and utilize the gas pedal. Just seeing a robot take off in the Ranger would be amazing. While Hubo only made it 1/3 of the way down the course before succumbing to a broken neck servo, it was quite a sight to see it drive. During testing the previous day, it had completed the course, but unfortunately, when points were on the line, a mechanical failure would be its demise. After seeing Hubo stop due to a mechanical failure, we were pretty skeptical about anything else being able to attempt, much less finish this task. The second day of the trials, there was much more success in the Ranger, and seeing a robot inside a vehicle like this helped me to realize just how far we have come with robotics technology. These ain't no rock'em sock'em robots. These are incredibly smart, very mobile, and while they are in their infancy when it comes to speed and precision, I can only imagine what 1, 3, or 5 years down the road will look like. While on site, there was much more than just the DARPA Robotics Challenge happening. There was a full exposition put on by DARPA of the most recent electronic robotic technology, and there was demos going on all day long. The diversity in design behind these mostly military-focused companies we were able to speak with was amazing. From briefcase-sized robots that can jump onto the roof of a second-story building to tracked single-arm bomb-probing designs, there was so much to see and talk about. From companies who sell automated 10-minute install side-by-side driving rigs to the designers of the eyes and brains of the robot, the technology was cool to look at, but we had hoped even cooler to see live in action. Part of the expo was multiple live demo areas, and to say that we were excited to see these robots go to work would be an understatement. Boston Dynamics was at the forefront of the demos and showed off robots you have most likely seen online. From very small designs that were virtually unable to get stuck to the larger four-legged designs that really got the crowd excited. Cheetah is a high-speed four-legged design that, while operated by a remote control, does still have to keep itself stable and upright at high speeds. It's loud and run by a 150cc methanol-powered go-kart engine that's capable of 55 horsepower. Seeing it in person was quite amazing. Of equally cool proportions was a significantly larger, four-legged, autonomous horse-like robot that will actually use a proximity sensor and follow the path of someone walking in front of it. Powered by a 550 Sportsman Polaris engine, this robot was impressive, but at the same time, scary to be close to, as the sheer size was significant. Tested to walk up mountains, over ice and snow, and take the impact of a side hit or force from an object, These large walking robots were something you'd only expect to see in a movie. While the technology is amazing, all are still loud and require fuel. And until the perfect battery that's incredibly energy rich and lightweight comes out, they probably won't be patrolling your neighborhood enforcing curfew. The DARPA Robotics Challenge was a very cool event for us to be able to be a part of. Not just seeing the Robotics Challenge and all of the cool expositions, but being able to see a company like Polaris and Polaris Defense interact with all of these different technologies. It helps us to understand why they can continue to put such robust technology into all of their vehicles that benefit all of us as the consumer.
DirtTrax is sponsored by Super ATV, the industry leader in aftermarket parts and accessories for the off-road market.
It was the first of its kind. For a short time, it stood alone as the king. But times change. The ATV industry is anything but dormant, and Can-Am's competition was not going to stay silent forever. Now, the Maverick is in a tooth and nail battle for supremacy in the hypersport side-by-side class. Its competition had the benefit of using the Maverick as their benchmark. The question now becomes, can the Maverick hold its own? .101 horsepower is nothing to scoff at. When Can-Am first released the Maverick, the side-by-side industry was literally shell-shocked for weeks. Breaking the 100 horsepower barrier was such a huge achievement, even the most cynical critics pondered whether or not anyone would ever be able to beat it. What makes this 101 horsepower so pleasing is that it's produced by a gigantic V-twin mill. Now, there may be valid reasons to go with another engine design, maybe there aren't. It doesn't really matter, because this 1000cc V-twin produces tractor-like torque and one of the sweetest exhaust notes I've ever heard. Top speeds of 70+ miles per hour can be reached in seconds and maintained as long as you dare hold the pedal to the floor. Sometimes an engine that produces this much bottom-end grunt tends to run out of steam on top, but the engineers at DRP have geared and clutched the Maverick to keep the RPM right in the sweet spot. When it was alone at the top, the Maverick seemed perfect, but now that it's got some competition, there's a few things I've noticed I'd really like Can-Am to change. The first one has to do with the rider seating position. The Maverick is a departure from traditional performance side-by-side design. A far stronger focus was put on rider comfort and amenities versus true performance ergonomics. The entire middle section of the Maverick is, more or less, pulled straight from a Commander. The cockpit itself is identical. It's impossible to argue that the Maverick lacks creature comforts, but in terms of performance ergonomics, it leaves a little to be desired. A vehicle designed to be run as hard as this one needs to place the driver and passenger in the best possible position to absorb the inevitable impacts this type of riding will produce. This is an easy fix. Can-Am doesn't seem to have any qualms redesigning their products to fix small ergonomic issues, so I'd like to see them redesign the seating position on next year's Maverick. For now though, I'd like to focus on something that I begged for on last year's model. Our biggest gripe with last year's Maverick was the lack of power steering. A vehicle this big and wide with this much power was, for lack of a better term, a beast to control in rough conditions. Can-Am had power steering. We were baffled why they chose not to use it. The 2014 XRS model we have here doesn't just have power steering. It has Can-Am's tri-mode dynamic power steering. Its 3 levels of assist are adjusted by a dashboard-mounted switch. The difference between the 3 levels is far more noticeable than I would have expected. Low is best used for high-speed running, where the maximum amount of feel through the steering wheel is necessary. Medium seemed to be a good choice for most trail running, where rock and stump hits are common. High was absolutely perfect for hard running on a track, in deep mud, or anywhere you really needed those front wheels to stay exactly where you point them. I was very impressed with the on-center feel at all levels of assist, and I can honestly say this is the first tri-mode DPS equipped vehicle that could be run in high mode all the time with no issues. Our final area of discussion has to be suspension. The Maverick's TTA trailing arm rear suspension has been engineered to perform like a 5-link, but not be a 5-link. 14 inches of travel is now on the low side in this category, but Fox 2.0 Podium X piggyback shocks are among the trickiest ever spec'd on a stock side-by-side. The Maverick is extremely well suspended, and its suspension does soak up bumps like a sheet of Bounty on orange juice. But jumping back and forth between the industry's top 3 performance side-by-side only highlights that the Maverick could seriously benefit from some longer legs. When the dust settles, we're still left with our original question. Can the Maverick hold its own among this new breed of hypersport side-by-sides? From a performance and features perspective, absolutely. The Maverick lacks nothing under the hood and has more creature comforts than the other 2 combined. But when the rubber hits the road, the Maverick is lacking in a couple key areas. And these may be things that only the most aggressive drivers will even notice. But that's the thing about aggressive drivers. They know exactly what they're looking for, and they will not settle for second best.
DirtTrax is sponsored by Triton Trailers. Know it, own it, haul it.
Each season, we try to bring you something new when it comes to tires and rims. They are the most popular upgrade for any ATV or side-by-side. And at the events that I attend, it seems like mud tires are where it's at. And trust me, I get it. Playing in the mud for most of us goes back to when we were kids and Mom said, don't do it. We all did it. But with the side-by-side category emerging so strong, what are the right choices for your rig? And what's going to fit without seriously impacting the performance of your ride? ITP has been a strong brand in ATV and side-by-side tires and rims. If you haven't heard of ITP, you probably haven't been out on the trail, because pretty much everyone has a set of mud lights. 2 seasons ago, we installed a square set of 30-inch ITP XXLs on our Project Recovery Ranger, and they truly would go anywhere, but required a lift kit and wheel spacers to keep from rubbing. For this year, we have something even more aggressive, but less intrusive. Let me show you what I mean. This is the Mammoth Mayhem. Yeah, it's Mammoth, and yes, it will create some mayhem. This tire is a full 32 inches in diameter and sports a 2-inch lug. And that 2-inch lug comes without compromise. What do I mean? Well, ITP knows that mud runners have to run trail to get to the best spots. Because of this, every Mayhem tire has been designed with a directional tread pattern and reduced weight when compared to the competition. This effectively creates a smoother ride, meaning you can still enjoy your ride when it's not feet deep. So what can you mount them on? Well, get this. With the SD dual beadlock rim from ITP, we're going to mount these on a stock Can-Am Maverick 1000 XRS. No lift, no spacers, all tire. The SD dual beadlock allows us to clamp the tire on the rim from both the front and rear of the tire. While most stock diameter tires won't need a beadlock, when you go to 32 inches, and especially with a 2-inch lug, there is a lot of leverage over the bead, especially with the 1000cc Rotax huge torque. So what's the real penalty when you go from a 27-inch tire to a 32 in the weight department? Keeping in mind that we just went to an incredibly larger tire, I think you'll actually be surprised with what the scales say. The new tire and rim combo weighs in at 72 pounds per wheel and tire. We're running a square setup for a total of 288 pounds. The old fronts weigh 31 apiece and the rears 39, for a grand total of 140. So at the end of the day, with a square setup, we only have gained 148 pounds, and that means we're still transferring more power to the ground. While the numbers say a whole lot, the real proof is in the pudding, and when you're rolling on 32s, there had better be one big bowl of it. Oh yeah, these tires claw, chew, and spit mud out every direction, and will not leave you clean. But it's mud, and mud is meant to be churned. When you settle down and claw slowly, the 2-inch paddle on the Mammoths truly shines. While high-speed runs are fun, slowing down to a reasonable pace will really put the big lugs to work. Obviously with a 2-inch lug, they're going to be great in the mud, but they're surprisingly smooth out on the trail, and that's exactly how ITP has designed them to be. Impressive in the mud, aggressive to look at, but reasonable on the trail, so you don't have to compromise. While I was expecting the ridiculous clunky rumble, the Mammoths are much smoother and ride surprisingly well down the trail. However, one thing you will notice instantly, 5 inches of increased tire, even with the reasonable weight increase, still means a decrease in power to the ground, as this Maverick was not clutched to turn a 32-inch tire. However, I know some fellas from Dalton Professional Clutch Components who can help me out in that department. So stay tuned to next week's episode, where I'm going to gain back all that horsepower I lost and go get muddy all over again.
DirtTrax Television has been sponsored by Polaris, the ultimate in off-road vehicles. Can-Am, the ride says it all. MBRP Performance Exhaust, making power with MBRP. And by Arctic Cat, share our passion.
If you enjoyed this video, post a comment and let us know what you think. Then, click this link to subscribe and that link for more great videos from DirtTrax TV.